Listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Karen Goldner with the Women's Business Development Center in Chicago, and I do apologize for our late delay. I had some technical difficulties, so I'm sorry about that. I'm glad that you could join us on the first of a special three-part series we're doing this month about sales. I want to, I guess, just sort of introduce myself first. This is me. I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center here. And a couple of important housekeeping notes. First of all, there are going to be several tools that you'll be able to download during our program today. And so they're tools that we're going to be talking about. You'll be able to see them on the screen, but you will not be able to download them after the program is over. So in other words, you will want to download them during the webinar, which is going to go for about 45 minutes. The second housekeeping item is if you have questions or technical problems, please go ahead and use the question feature on the right-hand side of your screen, which is also where the handouts are. You'll see where it says Handouts 5, but you'll see the questions box. Please just go ahead and type in your question whenever you have it, and I'll get it answered as soon as I can. So thank you very much for your assistance with that. And I see we've got a number of folks on the call, some of whom I recognize, many of whom I don't. And so what I'd like to go ahead and ask is that we bring up our first poll just to find out a little bit more about you. So over on the right-hand side where you'll see a box that says polls, and you can just open that up. And please vote. Let us know whether you're from Chicago, somewhere else in Illinois, another state, or another part of the world beyond the United States. Okay, well, everybody has voted. I appreciate that, and everybody is from the Chicagoland area. So that is, of course, where we are located, and hope that we would be able to work with you. And I'll talk more about that as we go along. Okay, so what are we going to do in this webinar today? We're going to talk about how to use some basic steps to plan your sales activity, because sales, for some people, it's very intuitive, and for the rest of us, it's less so. And often for those of us for whom it's not intuitive, we feel a little overwhelmed by it. So breaking it down into some steps that you can use on a practical basis to start to grow your business. Getting organized, which is part of that, and then start selling. So one of the risks of planning is that you use planning as an excuse not to actually do, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. As I mentioned, this is the first in a three-part series that we have this month of GrowthWheel webinars. And I'll talk about the dates of them at the end of the session, but you can always go to our website, wbbc.org, in the events calendar to find them. Okay, and as I indicated, there are some tools we'll be talking about and referencing during this webinar, and so you will need to download them during the webinar in order to have them later. We work with GrowthWheel on a license basis, and our license doesn't allow us to have the tools just up on the website loosely. They need to be just downloaded for clients. So during the workshop today, you can do that. Let's go ahead and do poll number 2. Want to just find out about how you heard about our webinar. So if you can just let us know. We are a nonprofit organization, but we try to operate like a business, and therefore like to know whether our various marketing efforts are producing the kind of results we want to see. So if the last couple of people could vote, I would appreciate it, and then we can close it out. Oh, great. So thank you. So most people heard about it from our website, and some heard about it from our e-blast. So terrific. Thank you. So again, these are the tools. I'm going to make sure that you remember to download them. Oh my gosh, that was fast. Sorry. I guess I continue to have technical difficulties. If you've been with us on previous GrowthWheel webinars, you'll remember what the GrowthWheel itself looks like. And there are 4 aspects that all businesses have to worry about. You have to have a good business concept, you have to have a strong organization, you have to operate profitably, and then obviously you want to have lasting customer relations. And then within each of those 4 quadrants, there's a lot of focus areas. And as you might imagine, the focus areas that we are focused on today is in the sales and service category. But you'll see that there's all of these other areas. We do webinars from all of them, really. And the ones that we have done in the past are archived on our website in the Events tab, but under Online Business Resources. Those archived webinars are available anytime you want. They do not have the tools that you can download, though, which is my reminder, once again, to please download the tools during the session. If you have problems, just shoot me a question in the questions bar. Okay, so let's get started with just kind of an overview. And on the one hand, this is so obvious that I'm almost feel like I shouldn't say it, but it is something that people often forget. Now, this is just a sample, right? This isn't necessarily how your business operates, but it's an illustration that in this business, for 100 prospects, you get to 1 order, right? So sales is a numbers game, and that's something that sometimes we lose track of. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. And then let's try and do poll number 3. How long have you been in business? Okay, it looks like nearly everybody's voted, and some people are in the planning but not yet generating revenue stage, and some people have been in business up between 1 to 3 years. So hopefully we'll be able to provide some value to both groups. One of the nice things about GrowthWheel is that it does give us those tools. And then why don't we just go ahead and do number 4, poll number 4, as long as we're doing polls. Have you worked with an SBDC before? There's a small business development center network across the country. In Illinois, we have a bunch of them. We are one of them, but there's others throughout the region as well. Okay, so yeah, some of you are WBDC clients. I've got some names look familiar, and many of you are not. And so at the end of the workshop or the webinar, we'll talk a little bit about how you can get engaged with us if you would like to. So we can go ahead and close that poll. Okay, now let's get back to the reason we're here today. Okay, one of the things about sales, I guess I'll just start out by saying, to me, that one of the things about any kind of topic that seems overwhelming and scary is that you want to think of it in breaking it down into steps, right? And so we have many, many steps of sales. And I need to just move one quick thing here. There we go. There are preparing for the sale, opening the sale, closing the sale, and then maintaining the sale. We're going to be looking at some of these other topics in the subsequent webinars that we're having later this month. So today, we're just going to be talking about these first 3 items: planning, lead generation, and to some extent, sales materials. So the first 3 steps. The first is planning, identifying your target client, and prioritizing. And I'm not going to, well, I guess I'm going to lie. I am going to talk a little bit about target client. But we've done webinars that the whole topic is identifying your target client. So I'm going to just skim over that today. But it is something that if you haven't really dug deeply into, you will want to. And then we'll talk about prioritizing. And then lead generation, right? Obtaining lists of actual prospective customers from third parties, perhaps. You know, some of this you can do online. Since you're all in the Chicago area, I'll say the Chicago Public Library has terrific resources that you can obtain for the low, low price of a CPL library card, and use Reference USA and other resources to get lists if you're in the B2B space, the business-to-business sales space. You want to create lists from your own contacts. And then you want to prepare necessary sales material. And the reason I highlight the word necessary here is because I don't want people to feel like that you can use the lack of perfection of your marketing materials as a reason not to go out and start selling. And I also would encourage you to think about what you need to do. What are your customers used to looking at? What are the kinds of things that your competitors are doing? Rather than just what are the list of 1 billion things that you could hire a high-price marketing firm to create for you. So you need to think about what is necessary in your industry, what's customary, what are your customers expecting to see, and then you want to prepare that. And those may be brochures, presentations, displays, and so forth. Okay, so let's talk just as an overview about who your target client is. Sometimes they're called target customer, sometimes it's called ideal customer, but really what you're trying to figure out is who is right down the middle of who your customer is. So if you have a clothing boutique and you're selling clothes that are in sort of a mid to high price point for women, then you're going to be talking about women. You're going to be talking about probably fashion-conscious women and fashion-conscious women with a certain income. You might be talking about a particular neighborhood if the store, primarily is a brick-and-mortar operation. If you're looking at a location maybe that's downtown, then that might appeal to a broader geographic range. Maybe you're talking about tourists in that phase as well. If you have a training company that you sell training services to corporations, not only do you want to think about who the corporations, what size of company and so forth, possibly an industry type or a corporation that has a certain type of employees, like maybe one with a large number of customer service representatives or something like that. But you also then want to know about who makes the buying decision and how do they make that decision. If I'm going to use the example of the boutique, it's fairly straightforward, right? Usually the consumer is buying her own clothes, or maybe it's a gift for somebody. But in a corporation, corporations don't buy things. Governments don't buy things. People who work for governments and for corporations buy things. So you want to know about them. What are their procedures? What are their decision-making processes like, right? And for each type of corporation or each specific corporation, that may be slightly different. Demographics refers to kind of the characteristics of the person in a sort of visible thing, right? Their age, sometimes race, gender, those kinds of things, where they live. Psychographics are the more emotional aspects of someone's decision making. So if this boutique is appealing to women between 35 and 60 of a certain income level in a certain geographic community, because that's where the location of the store is. And psychographics is why does somebody want to spend $150 on a blouse, right? So maybe it makes her feel special. Maybe she is in a very competitive business environment and really feels the need to look a certain way. You just need to understand those decision-making drivers that your customers and clients have. Then you want to know about how many are there of these kinds of customers and clients, right? And lastly, where are they? Oops. Okay, sorry, I'm having more technical difficulties. So you want to know where they are physically, and you want to know where they are online, okay? Because that helps you determine your marketing efforts. So then how do you prioritize? There's lots of different ways. I'm going to just give you a couple of things to think about. One is, who are the easiest, right? So who's in your neighborhood? Who is in your social neighborhood, right? And I was going to put social network in here, but I didn't. When I say your current network, what I mean are the people you already know. So let's talk about this training company that you might have. So you might find it easiest to sell to corporations based in the Chicagoland area. Whereas if you have a boutique, the geographic basis may really be closer. It may just be, you know, within a couple of zip codes. Who are in, you know, so let's target those companies or those customers geographically. How about your social network? Who are the people that you're that are currently on your Facebook list? You know, your Facebook page, or have liked your Facebook page. How about your existing LinkedIn contacts, right? So that's the easiest place to start, and sometimes that's as good a place to start as any, is what's easiest. And then within your current network, so people you actually know, and then who do they know? Always think in terms of second tier contacts, right? So it's not only that I know you, but you may know somebody that I need to know. And LinkedIn is just a fabulous resource for that. Another way to prioritize would be, who are your most profitable sales? Sometimes, not always, but sometimes this might be your big purchasers, right? If you're going to have to spend a number of hours working on a given sale, you might as well sell a lot as opposed to selling a little. If you've been in business for very long, you have a sense of what your high profit products are. So maybe prioritize the people or organizations that are going to be buying those kinds of products. So again, this is not to say that these are the only two ways to prioritize. These are just a couple of ideas. But hopefully that gets you thinking. And actually what I'm going to do right now is be quiet for a moment to have you write down, just on a piece of paper somewhere that you're going to keep, a couple of your own thoughts about prioritizing. And then if someone wants to share their thought, they are welcome to put that on a question, and I'll share that with the group. But I'm not going to make you. I just want you to think about it right now and make a couple notes. Okay, so hopefully you've had a moment to write down how you're going to think about prioritizing once you get off this call. The last thing I want you to do is to remember the length of your sales cycle. It always takes a while to sell. In some instances it doesn't, you know, it takes a few days or a couple weeks, and in some instances it can take over a year. You know, if you're selling to the government, that is not something that you can decide to do this morning and have closed by next week. The reason I mention that in the context of sales is because you may need to prioritize a variety of types of customers. In other words, let's say that you're this training company. Your most profitable customers are big purchasers, and they purchase a certain kind of very expensive training from you. But it also is going to take you a year to land those contracts. So what are you going to do in the meantime? You want to be working on these big, you know, the big profitable purchases, but you also are going to need to find other things to, you know, pay your rent in the meantime. So that's what I mean by that. You may need to vary your sales efforts in order to just keep your cash flow coming in. Okay, let's go back to one of the GrowthWheel tools, and that is called the sales chain. So if you remember from the other one that we showed a few minutes ago, which hopefully you're downloading, just a reminder, there was the preparation, the opening, the closing, and then maintaining the sale. So what this form does is let you rate yourself about how good you are on these various aspects, and you're just going to put a little X in whatever box you want. You can't do this on the webinar, obviously, but you will be able to do it when you download the worksheet. So how good are you at planning? And the planning really is going to be identifying your target client and prioritizing. And then prospect definition. So once you've defined who your ideal client is, then how do you turn that into essentially lists, right? How do you turn that into developing specific prospects? The way GrowthWheel uses the terminology, a prospect would be Acme Corporation, and Jane Smith is the purchasing officer. And then sales materials. Are you comfortable with what kinds of sales materials you have developed? Again, I'm going to warn you, please don't use lack of perfection here as an excuse to never try to go out and do a sale. The rest of these, which are all very important, networking, customer dialogue, and so forth, are things that we're going to talk about a little bit more in the subsequent webinars, and then we actually are just planning a webinar for August on specifically on networking. Okay, so now you have a sense of what you're good at and who should be responsible and how you improve it. I guess I sort of looped over that part, didn't I? Who should be responsible, and then what do you need to do to make it better if it's not, kind of in at least the 4 category. Then you need to start actually coming up with the numbers. And as I mentioned at the beginning, sales is a numbers game. So for the next 6 months, how many customer calls do you think you need to make? Maybe you're going to send out letters, meetings, it has lunches in here. All of these may not be relevant to your company, and there may be some that aren't listed here that you should put in there. Maybe you sell through some kind of sales chain where you need to have some partner meetings in order to access customers. Anyway, but you want to just write those down, and then you're going to set yourself goals for how many of these you're going to do in the first month and so forth. These are sales activities. This is direct, with an individual person that you're actually communicating with. Marketing is more general, right? It's also very important. And in some businesses, again, like my boutique example, I'm going to need to be able to somehow generate the people who are then going to come into my store to make purchases, right? A lot of the sales activities listed here are more along the lines of a B2B, a business-to-business kind of approach. But in any event, you're going to need to do all those things. So what this lets you do is give you kind of a sense of the volume of what you want to be working on. And then here is this 30, 60, 90 tool that you can use for all kinds of things as long as you download it. But I filled it out as kind of an example to just show you how you might use it. So here's the first thing. I'm going to call Jane Smith at this corporation that I'm identified. Now look what's good about this, right? I have an action, a specific thing. It's not contact. It's call. That means I'm going to use a telephone. Jane Smith. I have a person, and then I have the name of the company. And this is an Excel spreadsheet, actually. The other tools are typically PDFs that you can use. This is an Excel, so you can fill it in just as an Excel template. So I'm going to say that in week 1, I'm going to call her, and then I'm going to call her every month for the next, couple months. So month 2, I'm going to call her, and month 3, I'm going to call her. Similarly, I'm going to call Joe Johnson, Okay. Then I'm going to create a campaign schedule for email blasts. So what a campaign means is around a particular topic. Let's say you have a new kind of maybe financial analysis training that you're rolling out because there's been some new software in the market that a lot of your potential customers are using. So you might have a campaign around that new training product. In the retail space, maybe you have a campaign around Valentine's Day, and you're actually trying to email perhaps men about, Valentine's Day is coming up, and my store would be a wonderful way to, make your significant other feel special, whatever. But I'm going to come up with several campaigns, and then and I'm going to do that this week. Okay. Then I'm going to actually do that email blast next week, and then the next one I'm going to do the next month. Oops. And then the next one I'm going to do in the third month. Then look at this example. I'm going to get ready for this huge trade show, which I have specifically labeled Great Big Trade Show. And that's going to be a month from now. So what do I want to be doing? I want to be researching attendees who are going to be coming to the show. Now this week I'm awfully busy, so I'm going to say that I'm doing it next week. Then the following week, right, week 3, I'm going to email those attendees, basically saying, hey, I'm going to be at the trade show, and we're in booth 318, and I would love to see you, or maybe I have a special trinket for you if you stop by, whatever your email is going to say. But I'm not going to rely on email, particularly for my key prospects, because of course in my research I've identified some specific companies, maybe 8 or 10 companies that I really want to make sure I connect with. So I'm going to actually call those people. Say, hey, we're all going to be in Vegas next week for the trade show. Would love to, see if I could meet you for a drink, or maybe specifically, reach out and invite you to stop by my booth, or whatever, again, the contact is that you're going to be doing. Then we have the trade show, right? So, but then after that, so still in the same month too, I'm going to be following up with the prospects that I have qualified. So I'm going to have talked with, a dozen people, and I'm going to find out that 7 of them are simply not interested. They don't have a budget for what I'm selling. They're using another vendor that they're simply in love with, whatever it is. So there's maybe 5 opportunities there that I would call qualified, and then I'm going to follow up with them. And then, remember my email campaigns, I'm going to do an email blast for my last campaign, and that'll be in the next quarter. So this is kind of an example of how you might use this correctly. Let me give you an example of some what not to do. Okay, so here I say contact John Doe, contact Joe Johnson, email target clients. These are all super vague, right? I'm going to just write a letter for a mass mailing. Well, what am I going to mail to? I mean, who am I going to mail to? And then I'm going to send it. Send it to whom, right? So this is all really too vague. Then another problem that I have with this is all way out in the future, too far away. What am I doing in the middle, right? I'm putting up all of my sales activities because I don't want to do them. So you want to make sure that you don't have everything in week 1, but you also want to make sure that you don't have nothing as well. Don't have nothing, something like that. So don't do that. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to pop them in as we're going along. So, as I said at the beginning, you need to plan and prepare, but you also need to be selling. So what I encourage people to do is have daily outreach to potential customers. Make sure that every single weekday you are spending at least some time. It doesn't have to be 4 hours. Maybe it's a half an hour, 45 minutes of thinking of who can you contact that you haven't contacted before. Not necessarily follow-up, you need to do that too, but new prospects. The thing about making yourself do this every day is that after a couple weeks you end up having to get creative because you've already done the obvious stuff. And once you start to get creative, then good things happen, right? So you start thinking, okay, I am going to look at a Crane's list of the top 500 largest businesses in Chicago, and I'm going to then use LinkedIn to start figuring out who I know at these companies. Whatever it is, right? But that only happens if you make yourself do this every day. You want to balance research and action. Again, you want to be prepared. You know, you're not going to just start randomly picking up the phone and calling people without knowing who you're calling, but don't let yourself succumb to analysis paralysis, as they say it, right? And then also, and this is very difficult if you are in a one-person operation, don't wait until your sales drop to pay attention to selling. That's great advice, Karen. Easier said than done, and I get that. But again, you want to, even if you're busy running the business, which hopefully you are, you want to make sure that you're doing this daily outreach, because at some point the current training contract you have is going to end, or people are going to kind of forget about your store and wander off. And so if you wait until sales drop, then you're going to have to start kind of not from square one, but you're going to have a lull in sales while you get back to focusing on sales and letting those sales cycles play themselves out again. Okay, so here is the one thing to remember. And again, sales can be scary to people because you're worried about rejection, all of those things. But nobody's ever died from trying to sell something. People have gone out of business because they can't sell. So just keep that in mind. You will make it through this, and if you try to sell to someone and they don't want your product, they just won't buy it, and that's okay. It's not a reflection on you, it's not a reflection on them, it's just not a good fit at the time. Okay, so what would you do next then? One thing you can do if you've downloaded the tools is to just work through them on your own. You can make an appointment to see Meg Herman or myself if you're in the Chicago area, and you all are, and become a client of the WBDC. All of our advising services are provided at no charge, always, so you don't need to worry about that. But we would love to go through either these tools with you, or if you have other questions or in other aspects of your business. And then obviously for the people outside of Chicago, you can find an SBDC near you as well. So with Meg or myself, you might think through what are some of the other issues you're having and helping you kind of break through to that next level of planning. If you look at the GrowthWheel.com website, you will be able to see kind of the range of tools. As you might guess, I mean, GrowthWheel's business is selling these tools, so they're not going to make them available to you, but you can kind of get a sense of them. And certainly if you want to make an appointment with Meg or me, we can show you some of the other things that are available. And you can look at our website in the archived webinar set of programs to see some of the other things that we've done. And if you're watching any of these archived webinars and you think, wow, I would love to use that particular tool, just call us and make an appointment or email us and we can get you the tool. And then remember, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've got some sales webinars coming up. We have them scheduled for May 17th and 25th, and they're going to be really good ones to help you overcome objections and look at selling as a service which is a really good way, I think, to help, for some people particularly, help overcome, the feeling that you're some slick, underhanded salesperson. And then how do you set up an appointment, right? So that's super easy. You can call us. The phone number will be on the last slide. And everything is provided at no charge. I mean, all of the sessions are at no charge. We ask you to complete an intake form so that we can aggregate all the information and have you in as a client. And, it's a 45-minute to an hour type of appointment, not the completing the form. So here's our number, 312-853-3477, extension 100. And you can set up either with myself or with Meg, and we would love to talk with you either by phone or in person, and kind of work on what can help your business go to the next level. So, again, that's the extension 100. If folks have any questions, would love to hear from you. Please go ahead and pop them in. And again, you have a few more minutes to go ahead and download from the handouts. And then let's go ahead and do poll number 5 too, just to see if people are likely to use the tools, or how you plan to use the tools. So if you could let me know whether you're going to use the tool essentially yourself, make an appointment with us, come to another webinar, or some combination thereof. Terrific. So it looks like people are going to be using these tools, and that's great. And I do encourage you to make an appointment with us if you're so inclined. And then last question, which is going to sound a little random, but the poll number 6, we like to know if you are a veteran involved in child care, excuse me, located in Aurora, Illinois. Because we have a special program for veterans of the military and their families. We have a deep expertise in the child care industry, and actually have a child care expo coming up in June. And then also have recently opened a women's business center in Aurora, and we have a program called Scale Up, which helps businesses in that area. So it looks like none of the above, but I mention all those things to you because if you know someone who is, we do have somebody who is in the Aurora area. If you are interested in the Scale Up program, just shoot me your information in the question bar, and I won't share that with everybody, but then I can jot it down and we can follow up with you. Or possibly you are already a Scale Up graduate. So, one question is, let's talk about how do you identify what, well, I guess the question is about overcoming objections, and I'm going to defer that to my colleague Meg Herman, who's going to be handling that in the next webinar. But that is certainly an important part of selling. And then a question is, how do you know if you have the right or the necessary sales material? Well, I guess it really comes back to two things. For me, the cheat that I use as an advisor is it comes back to your prospective customers. What do your customers expect to see? If your customers expect to see kind of glossy brochures, then you probably need a glossy brochure. If they don't, then you probably don't. If your customers expect you to have an e-commerce type of website that allows them to make purchases on the website, then that's probably the kind of website you need. If they mostly just need need to have a website that they can look at to make you have some legitimacy, then that's the kind of website you need. So what are your customers expecting? And then to some extent, what's related to that is what are your competitors offering? So that's kind of the easiest way to solve a lot of questions, or to answer a lot of questions, is what, it's going back to your customer. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to end the webinar in about another minute to give people a chance to download those handouts so that you have access to them later. And I hope that you use them, and hope that you have found this to be helpful. So we'll keep the webinar open about another minute and then close it. Thank you all very much for sharing some time with us, and hope to see you soon. You are welcome. Somebody just said thank you. Okay, I think we can go ahead and close the webinar, and thanks all very much. Have a great afternoon, everybody.